Hello everybody, I am Volker from IBA Interior Business Association. We are very pleased to cooperate with Frame during this week in several occasions. Together we make the best possible use of the Architect Fair week while the fair itself unfortunately can't take place. Well, IBA wishes you an interesting half hour with Frame with a talk which Peter Maxwell will introduce.
Thanks very much, Volker. Hello, my name is Peter Maxwell and I'm the business editor at Frame. And I'm delighted to welcome you to the third day of talks we've curated with our partners Architect and IBA. The purpose of this week has really been to analyze what the future of the dedicated centralized workplace might be during a period in which its relevance has been brought starkly into question. As well as that, we're attempting to kind of map a route forward for the office typology in a way that feels more resilient, more responsive, and I guess ultimately and pertinently for this talk, more responsible. One universal takeaway from 2020 that I think we'll all share is how poorly provisioned many of us who live in urban centres are when it comes to access to nature. This comes at a time when our understanding of the real physiological and psychological benefits of that access have never been more widely recognised. That's why I believe it's a critical moment to look again at practices around what we describe as a biophilic design. Of course, we all know that biophilic design, particularly in the context of the workplace, is something that many designers and developers have been investing in for years. I think, however, that there's a growing recognition that what currently constitutes biophilic design is often insufficient in the degree and extent to which it's integrated into the spaces we inhabit. That's why I'm very excited to introduce today's first talk, titled Inside Out, Outside In, Why Developers Need to Start Thinking Beyond Biophilia, presented by someone who, if you ever type biophilia or biophilic design into Google, will be one of the first 2 or 3 search terms, Oliver Heath, founder of the eponymous design studio, Oliver Heath Design. And he's going to help us really start to ask some questions about what comes next in this conversation between nature and the built environment. Oliver, I'm going to pass control over to you of the slides. Give me 1 second. That should now be working. And perhaps you can kick off with a little bit about your practice and experience. And just a note to the audience, if there's time at the end, we will have questions. So please use Zoom's built-in Q&A function. And I will do my best to put those to Oliver at the end.
So thank you very much, Peter, for the introduction. My name's Oliver Heath. I'm an architectural and interior designer. I'm based in Brighton, in England, and we are specialists in biophilic design thinking, which essentially is about how we improve that human connection to nature and the buildings that we live and work in, not necessarily for the sake of bringing nature in, but to look at how we can improve human working conditions to put people in a better physical and mental state. So what I'd like to do today is to explain to you a little bit about why biophilic design is important for us as a society, the issues that are kind of coming up about it, then explain the 2 different approaches which you may not be aware of, and explain essentially why it's so much more than just greenery. And then I'd like to show you how we have applied it in a particular workplace project we've undertaken in Japan. So I run Oliver Heath Design, which is an architectural and interior design practice in Brighton. And it's a slightly unusual practice in that we are a kind of mixture of researchers and designers. So in the research department, what we do is we collate evidence and research that has been undertaken over the last 30 years that demonstrates the enormous value and benefit of enhancing that connection to nature in the built environment, and essentially looking at a variety of different human-centered approaches and the benefits we can bring. So we write a series of white papers, which you can actually download. I'll give you the address for that at the end. And then I think importantly, what we use is, we use that evidence to inform a better approach for the design of the spaces that we create. So we take this evidence-based approach, and that's fundamental to the way that we work. What I'd like to do today is to explain that whilst plants are this most incredible thing, able to photosynthesize, to remove CO2, to create oxygen, to remove toxins. They're beautiful, they're textural. We know they're wonderful, but biophilic design is so much more than just about adding plants and greenery into the space. It is certainly one of the patterns or ways that we'll do it. But biophilic design is really about how we put humans and people and occupants in buildings into a better physical and mental state to enable them to undertake and to perform the intended function of the space in a better way by reducing stress, aiding recuperation, and putting them in a better physical and mental state to connect with others around them. So health and well-being is clearly rising up the agenda across the built environment. In 2017, wellness real estate was worth $134 billion as a global industry, and growing at 6.4% each year, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, in North America, in Europe, and Asia Pacific. And this is a chart created by the Global Wellness Institute. And why are we talking about health and well-being now? Well, for me, there are, of course, a number of reasons, but zeroing in on why and how biophilic design can help, these particular issues for me are very important. Firstly, stress is endemic in our modern day lives, and perhaps now more than ever in the built environment in the middle of a pandemic, we're feeling stress created by buildings. Perhaps we're locked in at home around four walls and not getting that rich mixture of spaces. But even prior to that, the Health and Safety Executive in the UK undertakes regular studies, and in 2017-18 found that stress accounted for 44% of all work-related ill health and 57% of all working days lost. So clearly, stress in buildings is costing organizations a lot of money. The built environment isn't the sole contributing factor to this, but if we can do anything to mitigate that, then I think we should be investigating it. As well as that, urbanization is rising around the world. By 2050, 66% of the world will be urbanized. In the UK, already 90% of us are urbanized. As a result, we have less time spent in nature. Biodiversity tends to be pushed out. And of course, we spend an inordinate amount of time inside. In fact, even prior to the lockdown, we were spending 90% of our time indoors, so inevitably have a reduced connection to nature. And also, we have very high rates of technology. In the UK, 93% of us now have smart technology. It's very addictive, where once we would move from a desktop computer to just maybe having a break and gazing out the window. Now we inevitably tend to turn to our smartphones, look at news, weather, maybe social media. And it's that kind of directed attention that means that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to relax and recuperate, as we have done throughout human evolution. And I believe that that is very damaging to productivity and also creativity. Why is this important? Well, because actually 90% of typical business operating costs are in staff salaries and benefits. Whereas when we traditionally talk about sustainability, we're talking about energy use, the use of materials, and the circular economy. Actually, energy is only 1% of typical business operating costs. So what this chart demonstrates is that we really do need to think about human-centered design and how we can support people, both physically and mentally, to improve cognitive functioning, to improve people's connection to spaces and places, and realize the many potential benefits. So, biophilia, what is it? Biophilia quite literally means love of nature. It's a term that was popularized in the 1980s by Edward O. Wilson, and essentially it explains humans' innate attraction to nature and also natural processes. It kind of explains that when we want to take a break from our work, the place where we experience a lot of stress, we tend to head for the beach, the mountains, and the forest. And when we're in those spaces, we feel an incredible sense of calm and relaxation. So that idea of how our attraction and desire to be in and around nature has been developed into what we now call biophilic design, which essentially are a set of patterns or features that allow us to bring elements of nature back into the built environment, not necessarily to replicate being in the wilderness, but to elicit a positive emotional and physical response that reminds us of the time spent in it, and to create similar sort of stress-reducing or recuperative benefits that help us to be better, more positive, open, and optimistic. Now, where does this come from? Well, for 99% of human evolution, we've existed in very close connection to healthy forms of nature for our basic human survival. So many of the scenes that we see here were fundamental to us then and still fundamental to us today. Those ideas that we need shelter, warmth, security, access to fresh food, fresh water, and a sense of community to survive, thrive, and flourish. And because of this vast amount of time spent in and around healthy forms of nature, an interesting idea has been developed called the savanna theory. Now, what this suggests is that we have a preference for looking out over lush, healthy, savanna-like environments from a point of safety, or what we call prospect. So many of the things that we see here in this lush, healthy savanna environment are important to biophilic design. The fact that we have this point of safety, our prospect, we're looking out over lush, healthy greenery, so clearly life can be supported. We can see potential prey in the animals. We've got trees for fruit, wood for burning, stone for building, water for hydration, lots of natural light flooding down, and it's an open landscape, so we have these long vistas to see potential predators. The tricky thing is how do we translate these sort of ultimate landscapes into our dense, noisy, geometric urban environments? Well, that is where biophilic design steps in. Now, what you may not know about biophilic design is that there are two approaches in how we actually deliver it, and two ways of seeing the benefits. The first is what we call a neuroscientific approach, and this essentially is the benefits that that connection to nature brings us individually in its ability to reduce heart rates and blood pressure levels, to make us feel better, to help us reduce stress and to recuperate. Now, this is defined most succinctly by Terrapin Bright Green's 14 patterns of biophilic design, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a moment. The second approach to biophilic design was developed by one of the godfathers of the movement called Stephen Kellert. Now, he was very creative. He had 73 different attributes, so it's a real mouthful. It's probably more than a 20-minute webinar. This focused on this socio-psychological approach, focused on our relationship to spaces and how bringing nature in increases and improves that experience of space and puts us in a better, more open and optimistic state of mind. And as a result, helps us to form stronger connections to spaces, places, and also to the people in those spaces. And I'll explain through this webinar why both of those approaches have benefits. However, both of them do have three key constructs. The first is about that direct connection with nature. It's how we bring water, trees, plants, natural light, and fresh air into spaces, the sensory forms of nature. The second is in what we call the indirect connection to nature. It's how we evoke a feeling or mimic a sense of nature within a space, using natural materials, colors, textures, patterns, and even technologies. And the third is the human spatial response. It's how we create places that are energizing, exciting, and stimulating. And of course, we need that in the future workplace, but also to recognize that people do get tired and exhausted, and we need to create spaces that are calming, relaxing, and restorative. Now, the neuroscientific approach, the 14 patterns of biophilic design, succinctly creates these kind of 14 different ways within the three approaches. In the direct connection, we have the visual connection, we have the non-visual, which is all about the other senses, the haptic quality of touch or the scent. Non-rhythmic sensory stimuli is about that gentle movement we see in trees or ripples moving across a pool of water. The use of fresh air, the presence of water. Natural light is obviously fundamental to our health and well-being, and it's an ability to balance our circadian rhythms, which control our sleep-wake cycle, and our connection to those natural systems that happen more slowly across the year as we move between seasons. In the indirect, it's about natural shapes that remind us of nature and biomorphic forms. The use of natural materials and what we call complexity and order. See some of these kind of beautiful new materials that are coming out now. And the third is complexity and order, about some of the biophilic fractals and the richness that nature gives us and how we bring that into spaces. In the human spatial response, it's about prospect, being able to look out over a space and survey it. It's about refuge, being able to recuperate, and about creating excitement through mystery and peril. Now, for me, whilst of course, I love to bring real nature into spaces, one of the most exciting areas is how we mimic or evoke a feeling of nature using natural materials, colors, textures, and patterns, because there are so many exciting ways that this can happen. Over the last few years, I've been working with carpet manufacturer Interface, who created this biomimetic flooring that you can see in the image here. But what we are seeing are manufacturing techniques, design techniques, the use of different materials and recycling, and the recognition that certain materials can bring to enhance the quality of space. Because as the research demonstrates, Even simulated natural environments can facilitate stress reduction, and as a result can improve physiological and psychological responses to spaces. And for me as a designer, that idea that the choice or specification of a material can literally improve somebody's working experience is really exciting. As I've mentioned, there's lots and lots of research that underpins the benefits of biophilic design. In education environments, an amazing piece of research demonstrates that students who study in classrooms with real timber walls have a reduced heart rate of 8,600 beats per day, reducing stress and improving focus. In the world of hospitality, an area where I think the workplace really needs to look towards, again, evidence that demonstrates that hotel guests want to reserve rooms more quickly with garden views and are prepared to pay 23% more. And guests want to spend more time, 36% more time, in fact, in biophilic hotel lobbies than conventional lobbies, spaces where they're going to mix, mingle, talk, and importantly, spend money, buy drinks, eat food. But it's in the workplace that we can most accurately measure the real benefit of biophilic design, where it's been proven to reduce costs, things like absenteeism and staff turnover, and improve outcomes, things like creativity and productivity and engagement. Again, lots and lots of studies. In this one, office workers were found to perform 10 to 25% better on tests of mental recall and functioning when they had the best possible view looking out onto greenery. In this study, when natural features have been applied, there's a 15% reduction in absenteeism, reducing costs. And in this study by Interface, called the Human Spaces Biophilic Office Report, this is a study that studied 7,600 people across 16 different countries, so it's a very comprehensive report. In offices where natural elements like trees and plants and natural light were found, people self-reported a 15% higher level of well-being and were 6% more productive and 15% more creative. So the important part about this is that this evidence base is an opportunity for us to demonstrate the real value that we can create as designers for our clients. But moving on to that other approach, the socio-psychological approach. So this is Stephen Kellert's approach, and what we've done is we've combined the work of Stephen Kellert with the psychologists of McMillan and Chavis, looking at how we can connect people by using elements of nature to form stronger communities. Now, McMillan described a sense of community as a feeling that members have of belonging, a feeling that members matter to one another and to the group, and a shared faith that members' needs will be met through their commitment to be together. And we all know that nature can bring us together. Just, imagine this moment that we see here in front of us when you're sitting around a campfire, seeing the beautiful flickering movement, listening to the crackle of the logs as they burn, the wonderful rich aroma, and the focus that is created, and how it puts us in a better, more calm state of mind, and the wonderful conversations that happen when we sit around a campfire. And for me, it's that moment and how we bottle the quality of that sense of nature, that shared experience, and realize the benefits in our built environment through that connection to nature that's really exciting. So why are communities important? Well, I guess now more than ever, we're recognizing how we're starved of that sense of community and how a Zoom conversation just doesn't quite hit it in the same way. Well, communities benefit business. Organizations with stronger communities see lower employer turnover rates, higher economic returns, a greater sense of passion, common goals, and increased collaboration. And it can do fantastic things for business. In the workplace, of having versus not having a sense of community has shown that actually collaboration increases by 35%, creative thinking increases by 34%, informal social interaction, learning from others, and even taking a break, which is important to retain and improve cognitive focus, all increased by around a third. So having a sense of community is, of course, important for building occupants. And I think as we go back to the workplace, we're going to want to reconnect and find ways of doing that. Thinking back about Stephen Kellert's approach, contact with nature has been found to activate parts of the brain associated with love and empathy, increase feelings of unity, belonging, and neighborliness, create opportunities for reconnecting, and help us identify with a sense of place and emotional connection to it, and promote cooperative behavior. So combining these two approaches of McMillan and Chavis and Stephen Kellert, what we've done is created 7 features for enhancing a sense of community through biophilic design features. And I'm going to talk you through these quite quickly. So diversity. So we know that diversity is important for increasing a sense of resilience in nature. And mimicking that in the built environment means both having a variety of spaces, but also different types of furniture for different activities. Zoning spaces is important to help us understand what a space should be for, whether it's relaxing, recuperating, quiet, focused work, or connecting with people in informal meetings. Soft boundaries are about removing some of those harder boundaries that separate people and create a sense of ownership or trespass. So it's how we get people to connect through these softer boundaries whilst defining spaces. Collision spaces are how we create those moments of opportunistic connection. It's through town hall steps, having people moving through buildings, having destination points, having places where people can bump, meet, mingle, and then stop and sit and have a quiet conversation, because that's where innovation really happens. Growing spaces isn't necessarily just about bringing plants and greenery that develop over time. It's also about adaptability and how we can create spaces that can be affected and adapted by people's specific needs, whether it's through furniture, walls, through interacting with plants and greenery, or changing spaces. Sensory space is about bringing some of that kind of multi-sensory richness that we've evolved in and around into the built environment through food, through nature, through scenting, through plants and greenery and fresh air. And finally, triangulation, number 7. So this is about how we create those shared focal points that allow us to connect. It might be through town hall steps, the visual identity of having something that's moving and slowly recuperative, or even sitting around a fire in a space. So how do we bring all this stuff together? Well, this is a project where we've done just that. This is a Japanese refectory or dining space in Tokyo. It was a vast space. And essentially what happened was that the client found that this is a space that was busy in the middle of the daytime, very busy at lunchtime, but at the rest of the time, people didn't use the space at all. So it was massively underused. And if you look at the images on the right-hand side, you see it's a complete sort of desert, a monoculture of furniture that just delivers chairs and tables. And if you look at the plan on the right-hand side, it's just rows and rows and rows of tables. No variety, no diversity. Essentially, it could be a prison, refectory, or cafe, or restaurant space. So what we did is we looked at the kind of local area and we looked at those kind of positive moments that people might pick up on. And what we found were beautiful little parks and cafes in the park that people gravitated towards. And we wanted to recreate that sense of a cafe in the park, in this dining space, creating kind of meandering pathways, different places for people to sit, connections to nature, natural materials, colors, and textures. So we transformed that monoculture into a rich diversity of different spaces for people to sit at. There are long tables for people to sit and meet at. There are opportunities around the perimeter to maximize natural light and views. There are natural features. There are these winding paths allowing people to walk through, to explore, to bump into one another, to have shared moments with different groups of people, either groups of 4 or 2, to interact with nature and also water features. And here are some of the visuals of those spaces. You see the winding paths, the sense of materiality. The timber is really important here to create that naturalistic feel. The colors, the interface flooring, the biomimetic flooring that winds through. The introduction of plants to semi-screen the space and to soften acoustics. More creating that sense of diversity in placemaking and seating, greenery looking out towards the windows. And a final image showing some of those biomorphic forms, the green walls, those kind of meandering spaces, and that sense that you want to go and explore the space, but also that opportunity to have a quiet moment of self-reflection and recuperation. Now, if you'd like to know anything more about biophilic design, we've actually written a series of white papers that you can download for free that explore how you can introduce biophilic design at a range of costs, and also how you can introduce a sense of community. So go to oliverheath.com/resources to download those. Biophilic design is clearly so much more than just adding plants, and it's more than a trend. There are multiple benefits for us as designers, as we realize the opportunity to deliver better quality spaces for occupants who get to experience a better live-work balance with reduced stress and the opportunity to recuperate. And of course, better for our clients who get to experience reduced costs and improved building outcomes. And importantly, I think there is an environmental benefit that when we recognize that our health and well-being is intrinsically linked to health and well-being of nature around us. It leads us to a greater empathy and desire to connect with nature and take a greater sense of responsibility for environmental stewardship with the wider environment. Biophilic design is this essential component in the creation of happier and healthier places to live and work, because it's better for people, it's better for the planet, and it's better for productivity. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Oliver. That was really fascinating and really interesting to see some kind of live case studies and the transition between those two, especially at the end. We've got a couple of minutes now for some questions. And one question that I was really keen to ask, this year has obviously been quite a sea change in the majority of us kind of rethinking our relationship to nature on a global level, but also on an individual level. It'd be interesting to know someone who kind of is working at the heart of some of those questions, how the conversations have changed for you, whether that's with clients or with others within the industry, kind of what impact has this year had for you in terms of your thinking about our relationship to nature?
I think inevitably we're seeing a far greater desire to connect with the natural environment. A recognition that humans' impact on the environment is changing the climate, creating climate crisis. More and more companies want to get engaged with it, and the recognition that this isn't just about a carbon-centered conversation, but also about how we engage people with nature, to take responsibility for it and to recognize the benefit of it. So I think from a corporate point of view, there's clearly, like, you have to get on board, you have to do the right thing, you have to look at your CSR and look at your carbon footprints, but also a recognition that, you know, there's a lot more stress going on because of the COVID-19 pandemic. People are working from home, a recognition that stress levels have gone up. And I think individually, a realization and recognition that nature plays a fundamental role in helping us to manage stress. So getting out, even during lockdown, for some time every day, to spend time in nature is one of the best ways to help reduce stress and to connect with the natural environment again.
And kind of slightly related to that, the role biophilic design can play in reducing stress, I think it's really interesting to look at. I forget exactly which slide it was, but you had a list of kind of the characteristics that humans inherently, benefit from in terms of their immersion with nature. And the last two were, the first for the penultimate one was mystery. So to a degree, a sense of wonder, but also maybe getting lost, entering the unknown. And the last one was peril, which, if you think about peril in the workplace, that's two things that are hard to gel together, I'm sure, from a client's perspective. So it'd be interesting to know, just more of your thinking around that, and kind of, how you can bring the unknown, or what the value of bringing the unknown or uncontrolled into the workspace is.
Yeah, I mean, the workplace is very controlled. I mean, and its simplest level, it might be about bringing pets into work and the sort of randomness of a pet not following office procedure, and going up and connecting with people. So, those last two are really about how we raise adrenaline, how we create excitement, how we create sort of stimulating spaces. When we spend time in nature, and particularly, if we think back to our time as children being in nature, the ability to see natural forms, not necessarily just what they are, but playthings, climbing trees, building camps, building tree houses, rope swings, all of these things are about creating excitement. And then we know how much we enjoy them. Still as adults, I'll go on a rope swing and love spending time in nature, whether it's swimming in the sea, even at this time of year. And then, so we've got this kind of the wonder, the love, and the awe that we experience in nature. And then we have buildings. And buildings, no, we don't do nature. We don't have any of that. Buildings are serious things. You don't have any of that sense of wonder and delight. So for me, I grew up in Brighton, swimming in the sea. I was a windsurfing instructor. I had this deep passion and love of nature. So it was, how do you translate that sense of wonder and excitement into a building? Why not? Why shouldn't we find ways of doing that? And then it can be simple, like increasing that sense of vertigo by having glass screens and looking down over 7 floors and getting that moment of adrenaline, just the kind of that burst to wake you up. Or maybe a glass elevator, or maybe it's walking over a bridge or a gantry. There are many ways that we can do it. Even those simple things of having swings in work. I mean, why not? Why can't we enjoy spaces that we should be spending time in? I mean, if it helps us be productive and creative, even better.
Perfect. Yeah. Oliver, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fascinating. I'm just going to hand over to Volker to
thank you.
give us a quick outro. But thank you so much again.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, you both. And I hope everybody else joining us had an entertaining and instructive session as I had. We see again in 15 minutes in the next Frame session on Agile working and the engineering agency. Besides, we would like to invite you for the next conference in our schedule later that day at 4 o'clock from Personal Magazine, a German newspaper about home office and legal aspects. You will find all details in the IBA forum where you signed in for this session. In the meantime, visit the showrooms in the forum, where also you will find the media center with all the videos of this week. Thank you very much. Bye.